The quantum resonance of the Zorn warship Nexus Arbiter cut through the silence of near-Earth space like a surgical blade. Captain Vornak settled into his biomechanical command chair, its neural interfaces pulsing with millennia of collective Zorn military experience. His six-fingered hands moved across holographic displays with practiced precision, each gesture a testament to a civilization that had conquered hundreds of star systems. "Preliminary scans complete," announced Sub-Commander Krillix, her translucent exoskeleton shifting with barely contained anticipation. "Target planet: Earth. Technological index: primitive. Defensive capabilities: negligible." Vornak's secondary visual receptors, a recent cybernetic enhancement that allowed him to process multiple information streams simultaneously, flickered with a hint of boredom. This was to be another routine planetary acquisition. The Zorn Collective had long since perfected the art of planetary subjugation. Some civilizations fought. Most surrendered. A select few were deemed worthy of limited preservation as client species. Earth would be no different. 7,000 kilometers below, in a nondescript office building in Silicon Valley, Sarah Chen took a long sip of her rapidly cooling coffee. The quantum communication monitoring station she managed looked like nothing more than a standard network operations center. Banks of screens, clusters of servers, a few engineers in comfortable chairs. Nobody would have guessed that this unassuming room was humanity's first line of extraterrestrial defense. The first anomalous ping came at 3:47 Greenwich Mean Time. Most would have missed it. A microsecond-long quantum signature that didn't match any known communication protocol. But Sarah Chen wasn't most people. Her fingers, decorated with a faded tattoo of the Mandelbrot set, danced across multiple keyboards with the practiced speed of a concert pianist. "Got you," she muttered. The drone was her creation. Technically the property of the United Earth Space Defense Initiative, but really her personal project. Designed to look like nothing more than a standard communication satellite, it carried systems far more advanced than its innocuous exterior suggested. As the alien quantum signature probed Earth's communication networks, the drone began its own intricate dance. On the Nexus Arbiter, Sub-Commander Krillix's first indication that something was wrong came when their primary communication array began to deconstruct itself. "Captain." Her normally emotionless vocal synthesizer carried a rare note of surprise. "We're experiencing systemic communication degradation." Vornak's augmented brain processed the information with clinical precision. Communication network breaches were not unprecedented. The Zorn had encountered resistance before. But something felt different about this response. It was too precise. Too intentional. Back in the monitoring station, Sarah Chen allowed herself the smallest of smiles. The drone wasn't just blocking the alien communication. It was learning from it. Each quantum pulse was being analyzed, decoded, and transformed into a response that would look completely natural to the alien systems. "We're routing quantum encryption," she murmured, her fingers a blur. "Let's see how you like this." The Zorn warship systems began to experience cascading anomalies. Navigation subroutines flickered. Tactical displays became momentarily nonsensical. For the first time in centuries, the mighty Zorn Collective found itself momentarily blind and confused. Captain Vornak's cybernetic implants began running diagnostic sequences. Something was very wrong. This was not the response of a primitive planetary civilization. This was something else entirely. "Full tactical assessment," he commanded, his voice a low growl that resonated through the ship's neural network. "I want to know exactly what just happened." Little did he know, thousands of kilometers below, a 27-year-old human with a half-empty coffee cup and a mathematical tattoo had just delivered humanity's first message to the stars. "We are not what you expected." The miscalculation had begun. The Global Defense Coordination Center beneath the Swiss Alps was anything but calm. Major Marcus Rodriguez watched as holographic displays tracked the alien vessel's increasingly erratic movements. To his left, Dr. Yuki Tanaka, A quantum warfare specialist with more patents than most research institutions was orchestrating a symphony of technological defense that defied conventional military doctrine. "They're trying to triangulate our primary communication nodes," Yuki muttered, her fingers dancing across a haptic interface that looked more like an instrument than a weapon system. Classic hierarchical invasion protocol. Textbook stuff. Marcus knew nothing about this encounter would be textbook. Scattered across the globe, an unprecedented coalition was taking shape. In a repurposed subway station beneath Mumbai, a team of former cybercriminals worked alongside military cryptographers. In a research facility outside Sao Paulo, quantum computing experts were rewriting communication protocols in real time. From the Arctic to the Antarctic, humanity was transforming into a single adaptive organism. On the Nexus Arbiter, Captain Vornak's frustration was mounting. The ship's advanced diagnostic systems continued to return incomprehensible results. Sub-Commander Krulix approached with another report, her exoskeleton shifting nervously. "Captain, our communication arrays are experiencing quantum entanglement disruption, unlike anything in our historical records," she reported. "The human technological response is nonlinear." Nonlinear was an understatement. A special forces team, a unit that defied traditional military composition, was already in motion. Led by Commander Elena Reyes, the team represented a radical approach to extraterrestrial engagement. Two members were MIT quantum physicists. Another was a former Somali refugee with extraordinary systems engineering skills. The team's communication specialist had been a professional online game strategist before military recruitment. Their insertion method was equally unconventional. Initiating quantum ghost protocol, Elena spoke softly into her encryption-wrapped communication device. Around her, team members began deploying a series of technologies that seemed to bend the very laws of traditional warfare. Back in the Swiss mountain facility, Dr. Tanaka smiled. "Watch this," she told Marcus. The Zorn ship's internal systems began to experience something impossible. Computational pathways started to reconfigure themselves. Navigation subroutines developed unexpected recursive loops. What should have been a straightforward invasion was becoming a nightmare of adaptive complexity. Vornak's cybernetic implants were working overtime. For the first time in his extensive military career, he was facing an enemy that didn't just resist. It transformed. "Full defensive protocols," he commanded, but even as the words left his communication interface, he knew something fundamental had changed. The Special Forces team was now inside the ship, not through traditional boarding methods, but by exploiting quantum communication vulnerabilities that the Zorn didn't even know existed. They weren't just infiltrating. They were rewriting the very concept of infiltration. Elena Reyes moved through the alien vessel's corridors with a fluidity that defied explanation. Her team was simultaneously physical and quantum, present and not present, a state that would drive traditional military tacticians insane. "Primary systems compromised," whispered Dr. Ahmed, the team's quantum specialist. "We're not just disrupting. We're learning." On Earth, millions watched through encrypted global networks. This wasn't just a military operation. It was a species-wide demonstration of adaptability. The Zorn Collective was about to learn that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't technology. It was the ability to transform faster than any threat could anticipate. Captain Vornak stared at his command displays, a growing sense of unease replacing his initial confidence. This was no ordinary planetary encounter. This was something else entirely. The International Research Nexus looked like controlled chaos. Situated in a massive complex that sprawled across the Atacama Desert, it was humanity's most ambitious scientific collaboration to date. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood at the center of a holographic storm, surrounded by researchers from every conceivable background. To her left, a former child soldier from the Congo manipulated quantum algorithms with intuitive grace. To her right, an autistic programmer from Japan was translating alien communication protocols faster than any existing AI could process. A team of indigenous engineers from Brazil worked alongside retired NASA scientists, their diverse perspectives creating something entirely unprecedented. The captured Zorn communication device sat in the center of the lab, a piece of technology that would have taken most civilizations decades to even begin understanding. Elena and her team were dismantling and reconstructing it in hours. "It's not just about understanding," she murmured to her lead assistant, Marco Alvarez. "It's about reimagining." The device began to pulse with an internal light that wasn't part of its original design. What had been a sophisticated alien communication tool was rapidly becoming something entirely new. On the Nexus orbiter, Captain Vornak received the first truly alarming report from his science team. The communication device they had confidently quarantined was showing impossible readings. Its quantum signature was changing, evolving. "Impossible," Sub-Commander Krillix whispered, her exoskeleton rippling with technological uncertainty. But impossible was becoming humanity's specialty. The research team worked in a state of collective flow that defied traditional scientific methodology. They weren't just reverse engineering. They were engaged in a form of technological symbiosis that blurred the lines between human innovation and alien technology. Maria Gonzalez, a neural interface specialist who had spent her early career working with prosthetics for war veterans, made the breakthrough. The Zorn communication device wasn't just a tool. It was a living system of information, and humanity was learning to speak its language. "We're not decoding," she explained to the International Committee watching via encrypted transmission. "We're having a conversation." The device began to transform. What had been a sophisticated piece of alien technology was becoming something entirely new. It developed capabilities that its original creators could never have anticipated. Quantum entanglement protocols were being rewritten. Communication pathways were expanding in nonlinear dimensions. Vornak watched in growing disbelief as the preliminary reports came in. The humans weren't just understanding the technology, they were fundamentally changing it. In the Atacama complex, Elena Rodriguez allowed herself a rare moment of pure scientific joy. The team had just accomplished something that would rewrite every existing understanding of technological development. "Transmission ready," Marco announced. The modified communication device began to pulse, not with the rigid, hierarchical communication of the Zorn collective, but with something fluid, adaptive, alive. On board the Nexus orbiter, every communication screen erupted in a cascade of information that defied comprehension. It wasn't an attack. It wasn't a message. It was an invitation to understand. Captain Vornak felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries of military conquest. Genuine uncertainty. The device continued to pulse. Each transmission was a fractal of possibility. Mathematics became language. Technology became dialogue. The boundaries between understanding and invention dissolved. Humanity wasn't just responding to first contact. They were redefining it. In the Atacama Desert, Elena Rodriguez looked at the transformed device and smiled. Around her, a team of the most unlikely collaborators in human history continued their work. The technological singularity wasn't coming. It was already here. The Zorn Collective's xenanthropological database was extensive. Millennia of planetary conquests had refined their ability to categorize and predict species' behavioral patterns. Their initial analysis of humanity had been straightforward: a fractured civilization, riddled with internal conflicts, technological disparities, and seemingly self-destructive tendencies. They were catastrophically wrong. Dr. Aisha Okoye, lead researcher at the United Nations Extraterrestrial Cultural Intelligence Division, watched the global response unfold with a mixture of professional fascination and personal pride. The aliens had expected division. Instead, they were witnessing something unprecedented. A street performer in Mumbai was solving complex mathematical theorems on a makeshift sidewalk chalkboard. The video, transmitted through a global network that bypassed traditional media, went viral within minutes. Millions watched as a former construction worker demonstrated a proof that challenged fundamental assumptions about quantum mechanics. In a refugee camp in Sudan, a group of displaced teenagers had transformed their living space into a makeshift technology hub. Using reclaimed electronic parts and open-source learning platforms, they were developing communication technologies that would have been considered advanced in most developed nations a decade ago. The Zorn's monitoring systems couldn't comprehend what they were seeing. Captain Vornak studied the incoming data streams with increasing confusion. Human culture wasn't just resistant to external pressure, it was fundamentally transformative. Every attempt to categorize, to predict, to understand was met with a response that defied their most sophisticated analytical models. A global broadcast began. Not a coordinated message from world leaders, but a spontaneous, multi-layered communication that was part performance, part scientific demonstration, part cultural expression. Indigenous elders from the Amazon shared ecological knowledge that seamlessly integrated with quantum computing principles. A group of teenage gamers from Tokyo demonstrated problem-solving algorithms developed through collaborative online play. Musicians from West Africa used rhythmic patterns that perfectly mapped to complex communication protocols. It wasn't a message. It was a declaration. We are not what you expect. Sub-Commander Krillix found herself experiencing an emotion rarely documented in Zorn historical records: genuine bewilderment. The humans weren't just resisting. They were rewriting the very concept of resistance. Dr. Okoye understood the deeper strategy. This wasn't just a display of capabilities. It was a deliberate psychological operation designed to completely destabilize the Zorn's understanding of intelligent life. They're showing us their collective potential, she explained to her team. Not through military might, but through the most powerful weapon they possess: adaptability. On the Nexus Arbiter, Captain Vornak's advanced neural interfaces began to experience something unprecedented. The human cultural transmission was more than information. It was a form of cognitive interference that challenged the very foundations of Zorn perceptual frameworks. A child's drawing became a mathematical model. A traditional dance revealed complex systems theory. A piece of street art decoded quantum entanglement principles. The Zorn had conquered hundreds of civilizations. They had cataloged thousands of species, but they had never encountered a culture that was simultaneously so diverse and so unified. Humanity wasn't a single entity. It was a living, breathing, constantly evolving system of potential. The broadcast continued. No single narrative. No unified message. Just a cacophony of human experience that was somehow, impossibly, coherent. Captain Vornak realized something that would fundamentally change the Zorn Collective's understanding of intelligent life. Humanity wasn't just a species. It was a process. A continuous, unpredictable, magnificently chaotic process of becoming. In the refugee camp, in the urban centers, in the remote villages, in the digital spaces that connected them all, humans continued their impossible dance of collective innovation. The universe was watching. And nothing would ever be the same. The United Nations Extraterrestrial Engagement Facility wasn't what anyone would have expected. Located in a floating complex above the Pacific Ocean, it was a marvel of sustainable engineering and collaborative design. Here, the most unlikely team in human history prepared to change the course of interstellar relations. Dr. Imani Okoro stood at the center of a holographic display that looked more like an artistic installation than a diplomatic war room. To her left, a team of climate scientists worked alongside quantum physicists. To her right, indigenous knowledge keepers from 6 continents collaborated with cutting-edge engineers. The proposal they were developing would redefine everything the Zorn understood about technological exchange. It's not about giving them technology, Imani explained to the global committee watching via encrypted transmission. It's about solving problems they didn't even know they had. The energy solution they had developed was nothing short of revolutionary, drawing from a combination of sources: quantum mechanics, traditional ecological knowledge, and adaptive systems theory. It was an approach to resource management that would transform multiple civilizations. On the Nexus Arbiter, Captain Vornak received the initial proposal with a mixture of skepticism and growing intrigue. The human communication was deliberately complex, layered with multiple levels of meaning that challenged the Zorn's linear thinking. The core of the proposal was elegant in its complexity. It wasn't just an energy solution. It was a complete reimagining of resource management that integrated ecological sustainability, quantum efficiency, and social adaptability. Dr. Rosa Martinez, a climate engineer who had spent decades working in some of the most challenging environments on Earth, walked the committee through the proposal. Her presentation was a masterpiece of interdisciplinary communication. "We're not offering a technology," she explained. "We're offering a living system of problem-solving." The solution drew from unexpected sources: traditional water management techniques from the Andes, quantum computing principles developed by a collective of online researchers, ecological restoration methods pioneered by indigenous communities, machine learning algorithms created by a diverse, global network of programmers. Captain Vornak's neural interfaces began to process the proposal. It defied every existing model of technological exchange in the Zorn Collective's extensive historical records. The energy solution could potentially solve critical resource challenges that had plagued the Zorn for millennia. But it was more than that. It was a complete philosophical approach to resource management that challenged fundamental assumptions about technology, ecology, and social organization. Sub-Commander Krelix found herself experiencing something unprecedented. The human proposal wasn't just a technological solution. It was an invitation to a fundamentally different way of understanding resources, technology, and collective survival. Dr. Okoro knew exactly what they were doing. This wasn't a traditional diplomatic exchange. It was a deliberate demonstration of humanity's most powerful capability: adaptive problem-solving. "We're showing them that technology isn't just about power," she told her team. "It's about collective potential." The proposal included something even more radical: not just the solution itself, but a complete open-source framework for its development and implementation. The Zorn would have full access to the research process, the collaborative methods, the philosophical foundations that had created the solution. It was an unprecedented act of technological transparency. On the Nexus Arbiter, Captain Vornak realized they were facing something entirely new. This wasn't a species offering a technological solution. This was a species offering a new way of understanding technological development itself. The global team watched and waited. This was more than a diplomatic moment. This was a potential turning point in the understanding of intelligent life. "We're not just sharing technology," Dr. Martins said softly, her voice carrying the weight of generations of human struggle and innovation. "We're sharing a way of thinking." The universe held its breath. The Global Conflict Simulation Center wasn't a traditional military installation. Located in a repurposed arcology in Singapore, it looked more like a massive living neural network than a traditional war room. Here, strategy transcended conventional military thinking. General Amara Diop stood at the center of a holographic battle space that defied every existing model of strategic engagement. Around her, a team that would have been impossible to assemble a decade ago worked with seamless precision. A former child soldier from the Congo stood next to a quantum computing expert from MIT. A climate refugee from Bangladesh collaborated with a retired NASA strategist. A neurodivergent game theorist from Sweden worked alongside an indigenous tracker from the Amazon. "This isn't about winning," Amara murmured, her eyes reflecting the shifting holographic displays. "This is about redefining the entire concept of conflict." The Zorn had requested a strategic simulation, a standard protocol for assessing a new species' military capabilities. They expected a traditional war game. What they were about to receive would fundamentally challenge their understanding of strategic thinking. On the Nexus Arbiter, Captain Vornak prepared to observe what he assumed would be a standard tactical assessment. The ship's advanced simulation systems were calibrated to analyze millions of potential conflict scenarios. They would soon learn that human potential defied calibration. The first phase of the simulation began. Traditional military models would have focused on force projection, resource allocation, tactical superiority. The human team did something entirely unexpected. They turned the entire simulation into a collaborative problem-solving exercise. Each potential conflict scenario was approached not as a battle to be won, but as a complex system to be understood and transformed. Military strategies merged with ecological restoration techniques. Conflict resolution drew from indigenous conflict management practices. Tactical approaches integrated psychological understanding, climate adaptation, and social network theory. "Watch this," whispered Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the team's lead strategic analyst. The holographic display began to shift. What had started as a traditional military simulation became something else entirely. Potential conflict zones transformed into opportunities for collaborative resource management. Military units became problem-solving teams. Tactical advantages were measured not in terms of destruction, but in terms of collective human potential. Captain Vornak's neural interfaces began to overheat. The simulation was breaking every existing model of strategic analysis. A conflict scenario in a hypothetical resource-scarce region didn't result in traditional military engagement. Instead, the human team demonstrated a multi-layered approach that integrated technological innovation, social adaptation, and ecological restoration. A potential water conflict became a collaborative water management project. A territorial dispute transformed into a joint renewable energy initiative. Military resources were reimagined as problem-solving capabilities. Sub-Commander Krelix watched in growing bewilderment. This wasn't a simulation of military capability. This was a demonstration of something far more profound. "They're not showing us how they would fight," she whispered to Captain Vornak. "They're showing us how they would solve." The final phase of the simulation was the most shocking. When traditional strategic models would have called for escalation, the human team introduced a completely unexpected variable: collaborative transformation. Every potential conflict became an opportunity for collective problem-solving. Military units became adaptive learning teams. Tactical advantages were measured in terms of human potential, not destructive capability. General Diop understood the deeper strategy. This wasn't just a simulation. It was a deliberate psychological operation designed to completely reframe the Zorn's understanding of strategic engagement. "We're not demonstrating how we would fight," she told her team. "We're showing them how we would evolve." The simulation concluded. The Zorn's advanced analysis systems struggled to process what they had witnessed. This wasn't a demonstration of military might. It was a revelation of an entirely new approach to intelligence, conflict, and collective potential. Captain Vornak sat in silence, his centuries of military experience suddenly feeling obsolete. Humanity had just redefined strategic thinking, and nothing would ever be the same. The Zorn High Council chamber was unlike any diplomatic space in the known universe. Suspended in a quantum-stabilized pocket between galaxies, it represented the collective governance of a civilization that had dominated interstellar politics for millennia. Today, that dominance would be fundamentally challenged. Archon Zellera, the eldest of the Zorn Council, felt something unprecedented stirring in her neural network. Uncertainty, excitement, an emotion so rare among her species that it didn't even have a precise translation. "We are assembled," she announced, her voice resonating through quantum communication channels that spanned thousands of light years, to address the human question. The holographic representations of the most powerful beings in the Zorn collective materialized. Some appeared as pure energy constructs, others as biomechanical entities. A few chose more organic manifestations, but all shared one thing: a growing recognition that everything they understood about intelligent life was about to change. Dr. Elena Rodriguez sat in the United Nations Extraterrestrial Engagement Facility, watching the transmission. She wasn't alone. A diverse team of humans, scientists, philosophers, indigenous knowledge keepers, community leaders, represented humanity's collective response. The Zorn had requested, no, demanded, a comprehensive assessment of human potential. What they were about to receive would rewrite their entire understanding of intelligent life. "We're not here to be judged," Elena murmured to her team. "We're here to demonstrate." The presentation began, not with military might, not with technological superiority, but with a holographic representation of human complexity that defied every existing model of species assessment. They showed everything: the struggles, the failures, the moments of extraordinary collective achievement, the scientific breakthroughs born from collaborative networks, the ecological restoration projects that transformed entire continents, the cultural innovations that emerged from the most challenging circumstances. A sequence showed how communities devastated by climate change had developed adaptive technologies that transformed survival into collective evolution. Indigenous knowledge merged with quantum computing. Refugee communities became centers of innovative problem-solving. Every challenge became an opportunity for collective growth. Archanzelra watched as the human presentation began to deconstruct fundamental assumptions about intelligent life. This wasn't a species report. This was a living systems analysis. The humans weren't presenting their achievements. They were demonstrating a fundamental approach to existence itself. A moment from a Brazilian favela showed children developing computational solutions to local water management challenges. A sequence from an Arctic indigenous community demonstrated how traditional ecological knowledge was being integrated with climate adaptation technologies. A collaborative project from a Kenyan innovation hub showed how distributed networks could solve complex computational problems. They're not just sharing information, whispered subarchan Krillix, her neural interfaces struggling to process the complexity. They're inviting us to understand a different way of being. The presentation continued. Each moment was a fractal of potential, a refugee camp that became a center of technological innovation, a conflict zone transformed into a collaborative research environment, scientific breakthroughs emerging from the most unexpected human networks. Humanity wasn't presenting its strengths, it was revealing its fundamental nature: adaptive, collaborative, transformative. The Zorn High Council experienced a collective moment of quantum revelation. This wasn't a species to be categorized. This was a living system of collective potential. Elena Rodriguez understood the deeper strategy. This wasn't a diplomatic presentation. This was an invitation to a fundamentally different understanding of intelligence. "We're not asking to be accepted," she said softly. "We're demonstrating how we can transform together." The final sequence was unexpected. Instead of highlighting human achievements, it showed moments of collective vulnerability. Communities coming together, individuals supporting each other, the profound strength that emerged from genuine connection. Archanzelra felt something that no Zorn leader had experienced in millennia: genuine wonder. As the transmission concluded, the universe held its breath. Humanity had just redefined the concept of intelligent life, and nothing would ever be the same. The moment wasn't what anyone had expected. Humanity's first true interstellar collaborative mission launched not from a military installation, not from a government facility, but from a global network that defied traditional boundaries of organization and authority. The vessel, if it could be called that, was a marvel of distributed engineering. Its core had been designed by a collective of researchers from 16 different countries. Its propulsion system integrated quantum principles developed by an online community of physicists. Its navigation algorithms were a collaborative product of indigenous trackers, AI specialists, and neurological researchers. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood in the Global Coordination Center, watching the final preparations. Around her, a team that represented the true complexity of human potential worked with an intensity that bordered on collective meditation. Captain Vornak of the Zorn Collective observed from the Nexus Arbiter, his centuries of military experience rendering him momentarily speechless. This wasn't a traditional first contact mission. This was a deliberate demonstration of a fundamentally different approach to universal exploration. The vessel carried no weapons, no traditional defensive systems. Instead, it was loaded with something far more powerful: a comprehensive repository of human knowledge, collaborative problem-solving methodologies, and an open invitation to collective growth. "We're not going out there to claim," Elena explained to the global audience watching the transmission. "We're going out there to connect." The launch was unlike any in human history. There were no national flags, no traditional military ceremonies. Instead, a global network of individuals watched and participated. Indigenous elders performed traditional blessing ceremonies. Scientific communities shared real-time data. Artists created live interpretations of the mission. The vessel's first destination wasn't a strategic point of conquest. It was a region of space where multiple civilizations had historically struggled with resource management. Humanity's mission was simple, not to solve their problems, but to collaborate in developing adaptive solutions. Archon Zelra of the Zorn Collective watched the transmission with a mixture of fascination and growing understanding. This wasn't a species preparing for exploration. This was a living system preparing to engage with the universe. The vessel's communication systems were a work of art. Multiple layers of translation protocols, quantum entanglement communication methods, adaptive linguistic algorithms that could learn and transform in real time. But more than that, they were designed not just to communicate, but to understand. As it approached its first collaborative destination, the vessel began to broadcast. Not a message of human superiority, not a declaration of technological might. An invitation to collaborate, to grow, to transform together. The first response came from an unexpected source, a civilization that had been isolated for millennia, watching and waiting. They didn't respond with traditional diplomatic protocols. They responded with a complex mathematical sequence that was simultaneously a greeting, a cultural analysis, and an invitation to deeper understanding. Captain Vornak realized something profound. Humanity wasn't just entering the galactic stage. They were reimagining the very concept of stages. Inside the vessel, the crew represented something unprecedented. Scientists worked alongside artists. Philosophers collaborated with engineers. Indigenous knowledge keepers shared space with quantum researchers. Every traditional boundary of human organization had been dissolved. We are not here to lead. The vessel's primary communication protocol stated, we are here to learn, to grow, to transform together. The universe watched, and something fundamental changed. Archon Zelra turned to the Zorn High Council. We have been looking at intelligence all wrong, she said, her neural interfaces crackling with a new understanding. It was never about conquest. It was never about superiority. It was always about connection. As the vessel continued its journey, it left something behind in every system it passed. Not technology, not resources, possibility. The human vessel moved through the stars, a living testament to a fundamental truth. Intelligence is not a destination. It is a journey, and the journey has only just begun.